Welcome to another episode of Rockets Talk. I'm back with you here with my boy Roosh. Was good, bro?
Chilling, man. Another long day. I haven't really slept much lately, so but I'm excited to take some time to talk Rockets. How about you?
Is that a lie, bro? You really excited to talk about the Rockets? After
I mean, excited. Am I happy? I'm not happy excited, but it is like it's one of those like let's get it out. Let's
yeah,
let's
for sure. For sure.
you know what I
For sure.
mean?
I mean, yeah. I mean, coming off of as everybody knows, the Rockets are in a stretch of games where it's really kind of spiraled out of control as far as where we were at the end of December to where we are now. And I'm going to admit something. When we were doing a Twitter Spaces late into the night, you can tell we're dedicated Rockets fans, staying up till 1:30 talking about the Houston Rockets after a loss. Something like we were going through like some of the stuff as far as like where we started with the rebuild, and it kind of dawned on me that we ironically are in the exact same spot that we started in at the beginning of this rebuild, which is, and you had pointed this out, after the wow factor and all that stuff, try to win. We were so bad that we basically had to make the decision whether we wanted to tank. Forget this, a top 4 protected pick owned by Oklahoma City, which ended up becoming Jalen Green. And 3 years later, here we are. How crazy is that, bro?
Man, the craziest part to me, first of all, it's insane, right? So we spent all this, you have all the prospects, you spent all the 60 million at the cap, which when you think, okay, they spent all that cap money, that's what they went in terms of free agents. So that's off the table. Like that's a crazy feeling because you're like, okay, that you can't do that anymore unless you make some serious trades and open up some cap space. But yeah, they're in a position where it's like maybe they should tank. What is so interesting to me is I don't know if you remember, but I remember when they got Jalen Green, when they got that pick, right? Like simply on draft night or on lotto night, when it became clear that Houston was retaining its pick and not taking the 18th overall pick from OKC. It was like, whoo, hallelujah, amen. Like, cool, we can start this thing off right. And now 3 years later, it's like that pick, that guy that was picked that night with that pick, like, is he even really going to be a part of this thing in the future? Completely up in the air. So it's almost like getting that pick didn't really end up mattering in the end, maybe. But yeah, it's crazy, man. It's been a long, like people say, oh, you got to be patient. Teams turn it around in this time frame. Good teams figure out how to turn it around in this time frame. This is basically year 4 of the rebuild. Theoretically, it's year 3, but it's year 4 of being this shitty, and that matters, both for how fans feel and both for how public perceives you. And I mean, I said this in my in a tweet. I was like 9 first round picks over the last 3 years, 60 million plus spent in cap space, um, to go from 14 to 12. You know, like
Yeah.
that doesn't sound impressive. So I have to imagine if they get in a position where they're going to really tank and shut things down for the rest of the season, which arguably it might be the smart thing to do because they have top 4 protection on their pick, right? As we discussed, they're in the same position. Um, but to think that that's where they are, I have to imagine that that's not how they thought this season was going to
Right.
go.
Yeah, I think if you gave them a lie detector test, no, I don't think anybody envisioned this. It's I think, and the question of tanking or selling the rest of the season, because I don't think you can tank at this point. It's basically an organizational decision. It'd be a white flag on the year. Is that the right move? And I think that's the question that the Rockets are going to have to answer, because with you brought in Fred VanVleet, you brought in Dylan Brooks, you have all these guys that you're trying to build the culture. There was a lot of discussions during the actual when we were actually tanking about whether it was the right way to go about building this thing out. And to me, I was thinking about this today because you were brought up that we should, this is a topic and it's a very interesting topic. I was thinking about this today. This year we just had right now is, to me, a tank year for an elite team. And I'm going to explain why I think that, because basically you got the best of the first half of the season with competitive play. You have the veteran structure around. You have a good coach. You have a young budding star in Alperen Şengün. And you made the decision willingly, hey, you know what, guys, let's just stop because we have a outcome that we desire. This, to me, is what a good tank would look like if this was 2020, 2021. This is what the Rockets should have been. This is what OKC did because OKC had to sit SGA a lot of those years because they didn't want to win. And when you have to be, and this was when I was watching the team, I was telling people there's one thing to tank because you just suck, and there's another thing to like where you could be better, but you're stopping yourself, and to me that matters. For us to be 4 years and be at this point to make this decision, the ramifications, of course, are going to be different than in year one of a real tank because Fred is a vet, has his name on it. Ime has his name on it. I just don't see a world where they can even make that move because there's so much at stake, and it's kind of embarrassing at this. You know, what I mean, at the end of the day.
And you could do it, and the pick is top four protected, so you could do it and get the fifth pick, and then you just did that for nothing, right? I think logistically it'll be tough to even do because, and by the way, when I say tank, I just mean shut down Fred and Dylan basically,
Right.
and like not play Jeff Green, um, or Aaron Holiday. But that's why it becomes tough to do because then it's like, well, who do they play? So I don't even think they can do it. Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, Jeff Green, Jayshawn Tate, Aaron Holiday, Reggie Bullock, Jock Landale. Those aren't young like draft picks, so they got to play some of them, right? So it's like, why? I don't know. I have a tough time logistically seeing it happen. When you put it the way you put it, I think that's really interesting. It's like this is the way an elite team tanks, right? They have the veterans there bringing people along. They have the breakout season from a guy like Şengün where you can get some confidence and say, okay, maybe we got something here to build around. You get some data, you get some reps on all the other guys. They get a year older. They've improved. Jabari plays better. You're playing with house money because Tari hasn't even really played. He's only played, what, less than 22 minutes per game in only 22 games so far this season. He might not play another game this season. And then you go add the pick on top of that, and then you come back, and that's actually convincing to me. So that could make me look at it differently. But like you said, it's almost embarrassing because that would indicate this is phase 1B,
Yeah.
right? One A was like be terrible and accumulate the talent, and now you're still in that tank phase, but you've leveled up a little bit and you're taking like a material step forward. So it's 1A, it's like almost like 1B, right? But they didn't say that. They said phase 2. And so I think that they may in their heads have either skipped a step or just crossed their fingers hoping that they could skip a step, knowing that they might not be able to. Um, but yeah, so if that pick goes to OKC, right, they still get the Nets pick, but they lose their own pick. And then at that point, you gotta hope. Like we can be happy with the improvement Şengün's made, and I am, and Jabari, and like there's a lot to be happy about. But how much longer do you see that kind of taking to unfold before it gets you back to that level?
And I think one thing we discussed also yesterday was about setting the context for said trade or star, whatever it is, that player that you're ideally looking for to come to the team. Usually, guys that are that good coming out of situations where they're probably just maybe they didn't win to the extent that they like. They're not trying to go to a lottery team, right? That is just coming out of a season where they won 30 something games. So realistically for the Rockets, I mean, we just have to be real. On the market, how many guys are really going to want to come down to Houston? Unless it's something that has to do with either Ime Udoka. I think that's the only draw we have. And I don't know what his extent outside of the Celtics locker room is as far as with his relationships with players to want to make a guy like say, I'm going to Houston. And
The,
then
the
go
way
ahead.
it's just the way it's described to me is that he has a real influence. Players really respect him. Players really do want to play for him. Which, by the way, and we'll talk about Ime Udoka in a little bit, but when we discuss him, keep things like that in mind versus other coaches. But from what I hear, that's a real factor.
Right. And that's a big draw. I mean, he would be the only draw because you look at our roster, there's not really anything. Maybe Şengün, I'm not sure. He hasn't really made a name enough yet in the league where I mean, a lot of players do complement his game. And maybe there's a guard out there that sees that. Maybe there's an agent out there that says, you know what, I could put you where Jalen Green is playing right now, my client, two guard, scorer. And bro, you could average 30 over in Houston right now and get the big bag. So those are things we have to, but to me, the most important thing is really that culture you're trying to establish. The reason I don't think they can shut them down and I don't think it's feasible is because you spent all this time on all this work trying to coach these kids out of these bad habits, trying to build winning mentality in this. And to me, it would really reverse some of it. Now, I don't mean shutting down Fred in the last 10 games. That happens. Teams do that all the time. But to like, if we went all out on, and I don't think we'll do this, I just feel like we have too many guys with pride. If we went all out on actively trying to pursue that top 4 pick, as much as whatever the odds are, 20 something percent or whatever it could be, or however, I haven't done the math on it. I don't think it's worth the potential damage it could cause, not only to the reputation of the franchise, with the players, and to me, the young players, most importantly. We're getting to the point where, guys may just not want to play in Houston anymore after being here X amount of years. You keep losing every single season, and it's never like any progress going forward. So we have to start cultivating that winning culture. And some people may not agree. I know for a fact, especially like a lot of the Rockets watch crowd are very, very into like the numbers on odds and things like that. I'm not. I'm into that, but I'm more about the feel of the game, bro. Like I'm not like
I'm
ball don't
I'm in,
stop
I'm into the
level.
blend.
Yeah, I'm a blend. Yeah, I'm not ball don't stop. I'm not saying, you know what I mean? He would. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not ball don't stop, but he be cooking sometimes. So I actually think that,
I agree.
yeah, there are some art and chemistry in basketball, and I feel like that would disturb it.
Man, look, I agree with you, right? Like I'm into the numbers as well, but as a tool, and that goes for anything. So it's like you have to evaluate. Reputation is big. This is a closed circuit, right? You know how it is. Like when you're athletes in the same conference or in the same, like you always play each other. You talk to the same people. You run in the same circles. People talk, right? And if the vibe coming out of Houston is, oh man, that place is still just a clown show. Which I'm not saying that's what's happening, but you risk getting the reputation for, yeah, we're just going to tank, and that can be damaging. And I think also that Ime Udoka, totally guessing here, but I feel like Ime Udoka, if they came to him and they were like, "Hey, we're going to shut it down because we're going to try to maximize lottery odds," he'd probably be like, "No, not
No,
that's not what I came here for." Right? I cannot imagine that was a part of the discussion when they hired him. So I feel like you risk. I don't know if losing Ime would be the right way to put it, but I feel like you risk that relationship. Like if Stone, we've speculated and guessed about Stone and Ime based on the trade deadline because it seemed like Ime wanted to do something, and it seemed obviously like the front office did not. So I feel like there's potential for friction there. Just guessing. And if that is true, if that would be the case, you could see a world where the front office shutting down players would further that friction, right? So I just think there's a lot to risk there, and I agree with you. The potential to move up, if we had our own pick, maybe, but the fact that it's top four protected only, it's like sunk cost to me. Like, fuck it, take it, whatever. Let's just focus on getting better, winning more games, building morale, and building something for the future so that these guys are all excited to be here and motivated to get better together. That's kind of how I see it.
and I mean, you think about what the Suns did to close out in the bubble. A nice streak at the end of the year could really propel a team into, I mean, I think those things are valuable. I mean, just even getting on a groove where you beat a couple good teams en route to closing out, even though you don't make the play in. So I think I'm with you with the Ime part. I don't think, especially as a guy I've never made the playoffs. He's a Popovich guy. He's not a guy that's just a sponge for bad records like a Steven Silas was or Rafael
No.
Stone is as a general manager, where you're just a warm body there to take L's for a franchise's goals. He's actually, I'm sure he has his own ambitions as a coach. I'm sure he wants to be a Hall of Fame coach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think that, but we can stay on the Ime thing at this point. A lot of kind of mixed emotions about the fan base on how the team has looked. Obviously, we've kind of brought up some of our grievances about the offense that they've employed. But just overall, I'm curious to see what is your perception on Ime Udoka, and what do you think he stands right now as the coach for the Rockets, and like his outlook going forward with that.
Man, so you might have seen it. I've seen some of it where people are suggesting, oh, Ime Udoka might have been the wrong guy to hire, or oh, Ime Udoka this and that. Look, I think offensively they need to get a little more creative. I agree with that. Um, I do think that honestly is a question of, because I don't know, but it's a question, and someone should ask. By the way, if we could get someone to ask a good question, this might not be the worst question. Um, but the lack of off-ball movement, the lack of creativity and design, the fact that they overly rely on like one basic set of pick and roll between Şengün and Fred, and then the alternate is basically facing Şengün up at the free throw line, and then he just kind of works. They make a couple cuts and like that's it. Those are basically two things they do. Whether that's a function of Ime wanting it to be that stripped down and that narrowed down, or whether he thinks that the guys can't pick it up, or whether he's trying to tell the guys to move around and it's not working. People forget that part. We talked about it, right? Moving off the ball, you can't just like run around and ta-da, we moved off the ball, right? There's an art to it. There's a feel to it. There's a level of IQ required to execute it. So I give him the benefit of the doubt on that. It is my criticism. There's also sometimes rotations where I'm like, I don't like this rotation. So those are all valid criticisms. And by the way, every great coach has their criticism. So don't forget that. I would say keep that in perspective, because if fans try to run Ime Udoka out of town, the Houston Rockets are like in for a stretch of incompetence, right? You do not want that to happen. As far as Udoka himself, though, on the whole, so I don't think the roster is offensively talented enough for him to come in and just like, boom, let's turn on the lights. Guys are scoring. Like we talked about this. They have one guy scoring over 14 points per game efficiently, right? I was arguing with somebody about whether or not the Jazz were more talented than the Rockets, and I was like, the Jazz are like, league average in offense. They suck on defense. Yeah. But they have Lauri Markkanen, 25 points a game on like 63% TS. They got Colin Sexton, 17 points a game on like 61% TS. They got John Collins, third option. Our second option, Jalen Green, is their sixth man, Jordan Clarkson, with very similar
numbers. Not even. At this point, not even. But yeah, go
ahead. But, and so my point is, offensively, they're struggling. But man, I think people forget, they only added Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet. And they lost Tari Eason, basically, right? So you have to keep that in mind. And yet, I think they were 29th in defense last year. And right now, they're still number 8, even as bad as they played lately. They've been a top 8. We are 71% of the way through the season so far, 58 games out of 82. They have been a top 10 defense all season. And that is, to me, that is one of the quickest reflections of coaching, right? Dylan Brooks, all defense type player. No one else, though. And you lose Tari Eason. And you're playing guys like Aaron Holiday. You're playing Jalen Green, heavy minutes, 30 minutes a game. You're playing Şengün, 30-something, 32 minutes or something like that per game. And you still have a top 8 defense. And you don't even have an actual center to back up Şengün. And Dylan Brooks has been hurt for like 10 or 11 games. Jabari Smith has missed like 10 or 11 games. You know what I mean? I think people forget that. And that's a real improvement. So everything else aside, he's taken a roster that's very, very flawed. And he's got those boys playing top 10 defense so far, 71% of the way through the season. I think if nothing else, feather in his cap for that. But I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, it's a hard for me to gauge. Obviously, with the talks of him like being fired, that's just, or anything that's kind of dumb. Like, what are we talking about? And I think I've said this from the start. He's the biggest acquisition the Rockets have made, probably in this rebuild for the next few years. He's going to be, because a coach transcends the game, because they touch everything. They touch players as far as like what they do on the court. They're going to be in the front office, helping make decisions and kind of lending their insights as to what the organization should be doing. They're, like you just pointed out, recruiting with their, especially with Ime, a guy that's been around the league in locker rooms as an assistant and as a head coach on the Spurs. He's respected around the NBA. I think he brings a certain culture. He brings a certain view of the Rockets that we didn't have before. He's tough. And I just saw a thing about him leading all the NBA coaches in text, which is funny. But like he's our brand right now, because honestly, we don't have a brand. So if you had a picture of the Rockets, it's Ime Udoka. Yep. To the national public, to the national media. We haven't had a player that's kind of reached that pinnacle yet to take. So he's fulfilled. And the defensive thing, I think that's the hardest thing to do, is to turn a team into a good defensive team. An offensive team is personnel based. You can have a middle of the pack offense just by having the right personnel. It's not a coincidence as most of the worst offensive teams are teams that have a bunch of young players or teams that have a bunch of bad players. And I think for the Rockets, where we are right now, it was illustrated in the OKC game. Şengün on the court, we're scoring, we're generating open threes, we're getting to the free throw line. When he's off the court, it just goes completely to nothing. And we lost the game basically when he sat. Like once he sat down, I don't give a damn what the box plus minus or whatever says. If you watch the game, when he sat, we just got demolished. And by the time he came back in the fourth and started turning the ball, it was already kind of like we were down by like 11 or 12. So this just lends me to believe, I don't know the answer about whether it's Ime's, like, is he just not a good offensive coach? I think there's a lot of that. But I also think that the roster is just bad because the Celtics, I know Will Hardy was there with him, but they have a bunch of players, good players, and they were like a top 5 offense for most of the year. You know what I mean? And so if he can do it with them, if he's smart enough to know what it looks like, then I'm sure that how smart as we think we are, we're not as smart as him to say like, oh, do this and do that. And like, he doesn't know that. I just think the roster is just really bad.
Yeah, and I think the main way to underscore that, if we're talking just scoring points, right, in the NBA, which people forget, man, the NBA is good. Just because these dudes, we like them, and this is our team. Like every night you go out there, Tyus Jones had 17 dimes the other night. Like just dudes all around the league play at a high level. We have one guy who can both dribble and score. Sorry, dribble and shoot slash score at an elite level. One guy, and he's 6 feet tall. You know, like if that
Yeah.
doesn't tell you all you need to know about the roster and how hard it is for this team to get points, like they got one guy who can do both of those things at a high level, and he's 6 feet tall and can't really lay the ball up. So, and that's why also when people talk about, oh, we should have signed James Harden, all James Harden does is replace Fred VanVleet, and maybe you get better offense. I think you lose defense. And I think instead of the 24th or 23rd offense, maybe you're like 18th or 19th, maybe. And then instead of being the number 8 defense, you're probably like the number 17 defense, right? That's how I kind of view that. But yeah, I mean they just don't have go-to scorers. Every offensive option they have is flawed. Şengün can't shoot, even though he can still obviously get his. By the way, you remember earlier in the season when I think we were in a space and I was like, man, they got to post Şengün up basically every play because
Yeah.
when they don't, things fall apart. So I don't know if you agree with that now or maybe are closer to agreeing, but that's really all they got. They run through Şengün. Everything else is a roll of the dice. Jabari driving and doing that, like, he
Mm-hmm.
holds the ball low and he gets ripped because he's too tall and too long to be getting that low. Cam Whitmore still needs to be able to create instead of just score. Dylan Brooks is Dylan Brooks, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Fred is Fred. Like you already know what that is. Um, Aaron Holiday. Aaron Holiday is our second best creator off the
That's
dribble.
crazy.
That's crazy, right? And
That's wild.
obviously, I haven't mentioned Jalen Green, but because he hasn't really been playing well either. So it's like, what are you supposed to do with this offense? I mean, I think they need to move. Obviously, I agree with that. Amen Thompson can't shoot obviously either. I think they need to do some cutting. They need designed action, but it's hard to just implement on the fly and then execute, especially with the young team. Especially when you've been playing a certain way that was winning games. People forget that, right? Like abandoning that is kind of a tricky thing to do as a coach and as a team in general in the middle of the season. So there's a lot that goes into that, and I think we'll learn a lot about Ime in terms of like he's still developing. People talk about being patient with the players. If there's anyone I'm going to be more patient with than anyone, it's Ime Udoka because like you said, he's the brand. I trust in him. He's proven to me already. Like getting a team of basically the same level of defender, and then increasing relying on weaker defenders while getting a better defender like Dylan Brooks, it all kind of offsets it. So to me, going from 29th to 8th in defense, that tells me that when he speaks, they listen. Like he's got them
Mm-hmm.
bought in, you know? And that's a big thing because Steven Silas didn't have them bought in. Like we talk X's and O's and all that. Throw that out the window. Can Steven Silas get a team bought in? Can your head coach get that team bought in? And then when things are bad, can he keep them bought in? Right? That's one of the hardest things to do, especially in today's level of professional sports, right? And he's one of the guys that I think so far he does that. His reputation hasn't soured. So
I mean, that's a great point. I think one of the defining factors to me of a good head coach is to be able to like motivate and make lead men. And I think that's where a lot of people like Steven Silas was like genius, like as far as offensive. There's tapes he has on these like coaching clinics. He is really smart when it comes to basketball, but just knowing X and O's and actually being able to get guys to listen to you and buy into what you do, those are two different skill sets. And I think for a head coach, for me personally, having that being able to lead men is more important than the X and O's because, and I think your assistants and some of the hires down the staff. I think Will Hardy was important for him in Boston because to me, I look at what Utah is doing, and a lot of the motion, a lot of the movement, generating threes is kind of what Boston did in a better brand. It's like so we're trying to run that. Obviously, they have better players than us, but I could see Will Hardy's imprint on that team, and I've watched some interviews with them where he was basically like their co-head coach. Like they split it down the middle, and he was very involved in that team. And I'm not sure who is that for us. I don't, I think I think it's Ben Sullivan, the way they interact on the sidelines. But I would like to see a lot more. But it's really hard to gauge with young players, and then the lack of just NBA level, just high level talent on the team. And so I'm with you. I think Udoka, he's going to be here longer than probably anybody on the roster that's not a player that's going to be here for a while. And what I mean by that, he just got here. I had to go back real quick. I made a video of like a year ago, and I posted it on Twitter. Call How Would the Rebuild End? And I went through all the like different rebuilds over the past like 20 years, and looked at the different GMs and coaches, and like how they, like who got fired, who got every single coach got fired that started a tank. So we were there. Like Steven Silas is gone, and this was while Silas was a coach. The average time frame for a coach to work on like be part of a tanking team is 2 years. That's across multiple teams. It's 2 years. Most teams that tank go through about 3 or 4 coaches. The number two thing was the general managers.
Three or four coaches over how long of a stretch of time?
It just ranges. Some of them 1 or 2. I use the cutoff point as making the playoffs. So
Okay.
before they made the playoffs, some of them would be like 1 coach, some are 2 coaches, some are 4. And this kind of it gets like that's why like you point out about the timeline thing with like it's 5 years and next it's 10 years. That's how it happens. And you look at some of the teams involved in that, like Detroit, Orlando, some of the team
Washington.
Phoenix. Yeah, that you look at, man, they've had this guy's a coach, that guy's a coach. They had coaches interim fired in like 1 year. Some of them had coaches for 6 months. You see what Brooklyn's going through right now. That's kind
Yep.
of it's one of those type deals. But the GMs, 2.5 years. This includes everybody, even the Sixers. The Sixers went through 4 general managers during the process. Everybody quotes the process as, well, they went through 4 GMs.
Looks like they didn't trust their own process because they
Right.
kept
So
firing
like
everybody.
yeah, so people got to keep that in mind. They focus on the years of tanking, but they don't see that number one, they actually got a player that they were going to build their franchise on. And even after that, as they were tanking some more, they fired people. You got to
You
ask
talk,
yourself,
you talking about
what
Joel
were
Embiid?
they assessing? Huh?
Talking about Joel, the Sixers?
Yeah, Joel,
Yeah.
even though he was hurt. Joel, and then like you got to ask what were the Sixers assessing in their GMs while tanking that still made them fire them? So those are questions, people just got to look at. But I'm not, this is not about Rafael Stone per se. The point I'm saying is that these things happen over time, and a coach coming in, I think, as the second coach, as long as Ime Udoka trends this team in the right direction, he's going to be here. The common denominator right now is going to be Rafael Stone. I think this summer for him is going to be so important as to what imprint he can have on this team to say that he needs to be part of like the front office and everything going forward. And that could lead us to our next topic, which is a decision that Stone will have to make, which is how do you build this team? And I'm going to set the premise for you before we start. Okay, so we have, there's been a lot of discussions with the core 6. People say they want to build around Jabari, the Şengün. People want to build around Amen Thompson. And nobody really said Jalen, but a lot of people want to build around different players. With this collection of talent, if you were the general manager on the Rockets, how would you build this team out? And we're going to take turns. You're going to prioritize from the number one like prospect and downwards as far as priority on building a roster and why you think. I'm going to start with player A and B and C and Z. So I'm going to let you go first. If you had to pick out of our 6 players, which player is the priority center? They don't have to be quote unquote the centerpiece, but relative to our team, who is the guy that you're going to prioritize when you're building out your roster going forward?
Okay. Last thing I want to say about Ime Udoka, by the way, is the Rockets don't have a top 10 player, but they do have a top 10 coach. So don't forget that.
Facts.
Maybe even top 5. Don't take that for granted. Okay. I'm going to start with the philosophy. The reasoning for each player will be different. But the reasoning is baked into the player I'm picking, if that makes sense, right? So
Okay.
I'll explain that. I'm gonna start number one with Şengün. The reason is because out of the class I have right now, I know that kid can give me 21, 9, and 5. And I know that if I optimize an offense, I feel like he's the only one so far that's proven that you can actually put a real offense around him, and he can score and dish. And you're seeing Kendrick Perkins talk about Sabonis. Why isn't he an MVP candidate? Whether that actually happens or not. I mean, we're seeing Jokic, maybe Sabonis. Jokic is obviously MVP, maybe Sabonis as a candidate. If you have someone in that potential mold, and he's the furthest along out of all of them offensively, I got to go with Şengün. But that's because I value an offensive centerpiece to build around. That's also why I picked Şengün first, right? I value that over maybe like a defensive centerpiece or an all-around type player. So as we go down, it's equally about the reason as it is about the player. But
That's
Şengün
facts.
for me.
Okay, I'm gonna have to bop you there. Şengün for me as well. Many of the same reasons. I think the hardest thing to find in the NBA is a player that can help you generate offense. You can find every type of archetype. Like people talk about having this like rim running, shot blocking center. I mean, that's a dime a dozen, bro. There's a lot of guys that you could just draft that do that. What you're not gonna find is a guy that has that much gravity that just out the blue. You can't go find those guys on the streets or just, oh, there's a free agent out there. If I'm building a team and with these guys, I think you want to start with offense first because then you can supplement everything else. I'm going to go Şengün, same reasons you said. We haven't seen him with better players. We haven't seen him with shooting. He's the part of a top 10 defense. So I'm good there. The playoffs are still yet to be seen. I think there's going to be some. Obviously, we'll find out his limitations there when teams start hunting him. But I'm going to make this comment. I wanted to say this earlier. When I was watching that OKC game, bro, there was only one player on our team that looked like they belonged in the fight.
Yep.
And it was him.
Yep.
Compared to the talent on the other side, there was only one guy that looked like, oh yeah, he belongs like on this stage. And it was only him. There was nobody else. Nobody else on our roster. Everybody else looked bad, short, scared. He's the one that is like 1-on-3, like him versus Jalen Williams, SGA, and Chet. So yeah, I'm rolling with him.
And for that same reason, by the way, people talk about the playoffs. Maybe he gets defensively hunted. What we'll have to find out. Hopefully, we can find out one day. But man, he also strikes me as the type of cat that like when he gets a bunch of post ups and it's physical and it's like something's on the line. The European, the fob in him, and I can say that because I'm Middle Eastern. The fob in him will come out and he's going to be banging and I feel like he's going to be a beast scoring in the playoffs and dishing and
You
rebounding.
think he's a playoff like where he rises his game? I've kind of peeped that about him. When
Yes.
the stage is like he
You know
shows
how I
up.
know that? You know how I know that? Because first of all, this one I'm not so sure about, but I feel like in the play-in games against the Pelicans specifically, I feel like in the play-in games though he was like a dog, right?
Yeah.
But the reason I know that is because when he was playing all these international competitions for Turkey, we would run them in Rockets Watch, and I watched him like when country was on the line, I watched him get down, and I mean and against weaker teams, so that's kind of the question mark, but attitude wise, he was like, no, give me the ball. He was boxing dudes out, physical, like, he relishes the moment. So, do you want to go snake style? So me go one, and then you start two, and come back
Yeah.
to me.
We'll just go back and forth. Yeah.
Back and forth. Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Back.
So I go first every time. All right. All right. All
Yes.
right.
Yes. You'll set
Okay.
the pace.
Okay. And you got the white shirt on. I got the black shirt. So it's like chess. No,
White background. I'm the good. You're evil.
Okay, so number two, I'm going to go Amen Thompson. I'm going to go Amen Thompson because, so I didn't put him in one because I don't think Amen's ever going to be able to average 20 points per game or more. Not ever, but I feel like it's going to be very difficult for him to hit that, right? I think it's possible technically, just really difficult. and you to build around a guy that can't give you 20 plus per game every night, to me is more of a risk. I feel like Amen is going to be at his best. Excuse me, at his best when he's in like a Draymond type role. He can anchor a defense. Defensively, he's special. He can run an offense. He can dribble, obviously much better than Draymond, but he can't shoot as well as Draymond did in the prime years in Golden State. But he can, Ben Simmons type, all the archetypes we know about. Difference is he's 6'7". If he was like 6'10", I might have put him first. But to be that type of player without a shot at 6'7", to me, I think he's more of like a secondary, tertiary type player on a championship team, though. I mean, he's a hell of a player. So I go Amen second. The versatility, the skill set, the athleticism, the motor, the IQ, the defensive versatility. I value that second with the rest compared to the rest of the field.
Okay, so it's our top. Like it might be boring. I think it gets exciting towards the end, but I'm gonna go with Amen as well.
Okay.
I think Amen Thompson is for me. He's the most is just prospect. Like if you want to define a prospect as, I think he's our best prospect on an all around basis. I mean, when you talk about the physicality, the athleticism, the IQ, I think there's a lot of room for his whole game to grow. And he, to me, I judge, if I'm going to judge a prospect, I'm looking at physical stature, mental makeup, and then, obviously the on court stuff. I think he checks off more boxes than anybody else. But, this list is not for me, not based on like who's the best player in, theoretically. I think a lot of people get caught up in that. But I think Amen is a good balance of future. Like he has a chance to be really, really special, but also at baseline, he's just a really damn good player. And yeah, I would be with him. And ironically enough, Şengün and Amen, little Sixers, Simmons and Embiid, kind of a Walmart version.
That's pretty funny.
A
That is true,
Walmart.
though.
Have you noticed? I mean, to me, I'm just saying, if you want to pick a build, I know we talk about Denver and all these other teams, but I mean that Philly team that you look at how they built it out after they actually got both of those guys healthy. It was JJ Redick, they got the Jimmy Butler. That's an interesting roster to me to look at as far as what you
I,
might need.
I never thought of that, so I'm gonna have to sit down and think of that.
Yeah,
That's
you
really
gotta
interesting, though.
just look at it a little bit. Maybe that'll look at. But I'm gonna go with Amen Thompson. I'm gonna go with Amen for
Okay.
mine.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. That's interesting. That's really interesting. So okay, number three, and I could have gone a couple of ways on number three, but I'm gonna go with Jabari. I'm gonna go with Jabari because um, I don't think he's gonna be a scoring star. I do think Jabari can maybe give you 18 to 20 a night if you use him correctly. And so basically, he's my 6'10", 6'11" stretch big who I can also use as a movement shooter and make him unique in that way. Kind of like the 6'10", 6'11" Klay Thompson comparisons that people were trying to make before the draft, right? And then he's a two-way big, right? So he can defend. I think with him, you can you can easily picture the type of center you'd want to put next to him and very easily construct your front court. He doesn't need a whole lot of touches, so you can go get a ball dominant player to kind of bring with him. I don't think he's a number two on a championship team, but I think he's a super legit number three, right? As like defense, every 5-6 games he's going to go off shooting 36% from three so far this season. TS is like 56, 57%. So yeah, I think he gives you a solid defensive two-way big with offensive upside, and it makes it easy to build the team out around him.
That's a good pick, and this is where we're probably going to part ways. I'm not. I'm going to go with Tari Eason
Okay.
for my third player, and to me, the reason I'm picking the three most impactful players like right now, and because I love Jabari, and I think you're right in everything you said, but he really doesn't impact much as far as winning right now, even with his good games. Like he could have 20 and 20, we get blown out by like 25. Like it doesn't, what I mean? It's just kind of like, oh wow, damn, Jabari had a good game,
Yeah,
and we're
yeah.
like down 30.
You know,
And it's
you know
not
what's
because
interesting. You know what's
go ahead.
interesting is Ime plays him a lot. Like Ime
Yeah, I
plays
mean
him
he's
the
yeah.
most. Yeah,
Because he's so versatile. Like he could play the
right.
5, he could play the 4, he could play the 3. He can guard multiple positions, and you love that. I just think that Tari Eason can do a lot of the same things. He's not as tall, but he's a better defender, better on-ball defender, more chaotic defender. I think
Mm.
his shooting is, not as great. Like I think he's low key this year, notwithstanding, he's been a pretty reliable shooter, and he just makes things happen. Rebounding, I think, at this, Jabari's getting up there. Tari Eason's still a very elite rebounder, but the defense, the fluidity of his game, I think Tari can unlock some self creation with working on his handles. I think that's still in his bag. I've seen him kind of do some things where he can, get into a mid range pull up. All of that is still there. My biggest issue with Tari is like some of the CTE plays he has during the game. But aside from that and missing layups, I think he's a special player. And if I'm building a roster, like I really value guys that impact winning young, because I think that scales up. So I'm gonna go with Tari. So let me just recap for everybody. We both got Şengün and Amanda as 1 and 2. Your third was Jabari, minus Tari. So we got 3 more guys. So I'm curious to see who's your number 4.
So everything you just laid out makes me want to say Tari number 4. I didn't initially have him number 4, so I'm going to stick to what I had.
Ooh,
But
that's
your but your
interesting.
but your argument, I mean, and I'll tell you why. I'm gonna go Cam Whitmore at number 4. Now
Okay.
I'm gonna go boom or bust here though. So, and what I mean by that is I'm taking the upside swing at the expense of the guaranteed winning contribution and production that Tari gives you. I'm going to take the upside swing and hope that, hey, maybe this kid could be, 25 point per game, legit, alpha scoring wing, like do it all kind of guy. And that's the only reason, right? There is now the bust is he could just be like 6'7" Cam Thomas, so that could also be the case.
Yeah.
I saw you compare him to J.R. Smith actually. We were in a Rockets watch and someone put the tweet in. They were like, "Oh, Frank says Cam Whitmore." Was it Cam Whitmore that you said that about?
Yeah, Cam.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, I think so.
yeah. And like, I was like J.R. Smith, and then I looked at it and I was like, "Oh yeah, I can see that." Because J.R. Smith coming out of high school, I mean, he could do it all, and it looked really
Yeah.
pretty, right? But he's just a scorer basically, and that's fine. But that was his role.
That dude,
Um,
J.R. Smith, just real quick, I watch battle rap.
okay.
Uh, there's a line by this dude named Hitman Holla. He says, "Shoot soon as I get in, like I'm J.R. Smith." That's what I think about every time I see. He was talking about going into a club, but he was saying, "Shoot soon as I get in, like I'm J.R." That's what I think about when I think about Cam Whitmore, bro. Like
Do
this
you
man.
remember?
Go
Do you
ahead.
remember watching the McDonald's All American game when J.R. Smith was in it, like
Yeah,
20
yeah,
whatever
I've
it was?
watched it. Yes.
Man, I didn't know who he was, and I watched it that night, and I was like, "Yo, that was the first guy that I can like remember in my brain the picture seeing that dude pull up from like half court in a game." I was like, "What what is this guy
and
doing?"
and and he was dead serious about it too.
Yes,
Not on some
yeah,
no cute Steph, like that's he thought that was a good shot.
bro, and he hit like 6 of them in that game, and I
Yeah.
remember just being like, "Yo, this is crazy." And so I started. That was the guy that made me try to do that, like before Steph was Steph. So I think I want to give J.R. Smith his props there. J.R. Smith was crazy though, man. The dunks, like he was electric.
Great.
But Cam Whitmore is basically that. He comes
Okay.
in, man, shots go up, and sometimes they fall, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes he doesn't make the right pass and just steps back when he shouldn't. I think as of right now, he's averaging zero point 0.9 assists per game per 36. So
Oh Lord.
when you take his stats to 36 minutes, he doesn't even hit one full
If
assist.
you can't
Um,
get one, man, yeah, that's crazy.
you know what I mean? So that's the downside because I think it's going to be a hard thing for him to develop. Like if he jumps to being a 20 something points per game, 5 something assists per game type guy, that would be whoa to me. But either way, I'm going to take the upside swing on Cam
Okay.
Whitmore. So that's why.
All right, I'm not mad at that. I'm gonna go with Jabari for my number 4. For all the things you said, I think Jabari, to me personally, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, he's gonna be he's a power forward. I know people want him to play the 3. I don't think his point of attack defense is good enough to guard threes fully. And like yesterday, he was getting cooked. As good as he played, like OKC was working him. And I don't think that gets much better. I think what he can get better in is get stronger for post against the post ups. I think the weak side help can be better, and that's just instincts. I think he can just learn to be a better team defender. I'd compared him to Robert Covington.
Mm,
Um, Kind of, and that's a mixed comp. It's not, I don't know, somebody, it might be a compliment, maybe it's not a compliment. Robert Covington's in his prime, great team defender, weak side shot blocker, deflector, steals, long wingspan, not really super athletic, but his length just bothered a lot of shots and at the rim as well. But he was not a good point of attack defender. And If you guys remember in the bubble, they were running train on him. They were taking turns with
Chris
what's his
Paul,
what brother name Schroeder,
Schroeder,
CP, and
yeah,
Shea were just one hunt. Like when I talk about
yeah,
hunt, they were hunting this man
I
like
remember
to
that.
the point where they should have probably just benched him. But we need him. But I think Jabari is. I like him. I think him and Shangoon have the most seamless pairing on our team. And that's kind of disappointing going back to Udoka, why we haven't explored that more. You
Yeah,
see the inside the 3 point line screens that they run, big on big screens. That stuff is easy. Like those are such easy buckets. And I think they can explore that more. And that's another grievance of mine. Like our team is so guard oriented, but I think Jabari, he's a good player. He's a good player. I think he's going to be a good player. He's a solid NBA player at baseline. Like you can just plop him on any team, and
yep.
he's just there, and he can play. And yeah, so I'm going to go with Jabari. All right,
Okay,
who's your number five? I wonder who it is going to be.
and that's why I had Jabari at 3. I'll go Tari 5. So everything that you mentioned is correct and true, and that's definitely one way to take it. Again, I only put him, so I put him beneath Cam because I'm going for the upside swing. Like I said, I put Tari beneath Jabari, just because I feel like Jabari has a little more offensive upside. Like I think Tari's a better defender, and definitely right now he impacts winning more. But I still think there's a little piece of Jabari in there that if you use him as a movement shooter, and you get him cutting, like it gets him going, and he becomes sharp, he becomes aggressive. But if you do use him the way that he's been used so far in his career, it's very Robert Covington. Yeah, he's spotting up, shooting, driving, and like every now and then it works, kind of. And that's really all he's been limited to. But you see those flat, like Robert Covington didn't have that mid-range game, you know,
Right,
triple
right,
threat from the
right,
elbow, rise
right.
up, fade away, post. Like Robert Covington didn't
I
have
meant
that.
defensively, not offensively. Yeah,
Sure. Well, but right now, offensively and defensively, like 13 and
yeah,
8. That's Robert Covington. 13 and 8. Sometimes he hits a bunch of threes. Sometimes he drives and gets his shit thrown. Like
yeah.
that's Robert Covington. So far, that's what he's been. But yeah, Tari fifth. Just for those reasons, I do think you could start Tari on a winning team right away. He might make it like a little awkward. Is he the 4? Is he the 3? Because he doesn't have the ball skills to me to be like a straight up 3 wing. So you got to get that scoring from somewhere else, in terms of how you build the team. So that it's just a little unclear to me. And I feel like Jabari, I know like, okay, stretch 4. I know what type of big to put next to him. I can figure that out. But Tari's our most impactful player. I think Tari's, if I had to rank our best players right now, I would rank Tari ahead of Jabari.
Yeah,
So,
same. And my number five is Cam Whitmore.
yep.
I am worried about Cam's not really his play in the NBA, but what his upside is. I think it's very limited by what you pointed out with the zero point 0.9 assists per 36. Like that's crazy. I don't value scoring as much as other people. More, I like offensive creation. I think offensive creation is probably the most elite offensive skill a player could have.
Yep.
And scoring is just like, I just see it as another like stat tool, like rebounding, or a guy that's a really good shot blocker. Like it's a great thing to have, but as far as impact and winning, just being able to score buckets really in a vacuum doesn't. What I mean, that's just my philosophy. And people that watch the channel know me. Like, if you're going to be a guard or a wing scorer or any type of scorer, you're either going to need to be a playmaker or a two-way just stud to really make it worthwhile for the team. Cam's defense has been it's been okay. He gets lost sometimes, but I think it's actually better than I thought it would be. I think his best route to being that player that we want him to be is going to be a two-way player, and I think that's still there for him, where he can be just a guy that solid defender and can give you buckets on a nightly basis and make the right plays, not like passing the ball, but just make the right passes. But I'm going to go with Cam. So obviously that leaves both of us with the same number 6, which is the highest pick in the Rockets franchise in the past since Yao Ming. Why is Jalen not on your number 1? Why is Jalen number 6 on your list?
You want me to say it or do you want to take it? I think people
All
know
right, go
how I
ahead.
feel
Go
about
ahead. Go ahead.
it.
You can take these bullets from all the Jalen fans.
I'm that meme where I'm
I'm
just like
passing it off.
taking all the arrows. Okay, so yeah, I mean, look, all the reasons we know, right? Okay, first of all, he can't shoot. I don't know what it's at now, but I think it's 30 something percent from 3. It's just unacceptable for the player he's supposed to be, right? He's not a threat from 3. On wide open threes, I think he's shooting 27% on the season, something like that.
Yes.
Um, I think Alperen Şengün is shooting a better percentage than him on wide open threes, which is how does that even happen, right? He loses the ball so much when he goes up. He loses it when he catches it. He loses it when he drives, and we saw it last night. He has no awareness. He drives into Chet 3 4 times trying to finish, and he's just getting his shit thrown left and right, or he's losing the ball. He always seems to start turning it on. He had that little stretch in the third, which was good. He scored like I think 6 points. One of them was a tip in, so great hustle play, but like not the elite skill and creation that we're waiting to see on a consistent basis. But he plays his best when we're down by 20. Like it happened again in the fourth. He had that dunk, and it's like okay, the Rockets are down. I think like a 17. Like he just feels comfortable when there's nothing on the line. And maybe you can say, oh, I'm just making some shit up. That's really what it feels like, and that's why it feels like in the previous seasons, people say, oh, they play with a faster pace. Oh, he had different coaching, different system, blah, blah, blah. No, they just knew they were going to lose. So he had the freedom to go out there and do whatever. There was no pressure. It seems like when the pressure's on, like for 4 quarters, not just in one moment at the end of the game, we've seen him hit some clutch shots before, so I'll give him that. But 4 quarters of pressure, hey, this is a big game. Hey, it's a tough opponent. Hey, we need to win tonight. We just see him fade. And it's like getting worse and worse, and then he'll spill some buckets in at the end and make it look a little prettier than it was. But if you watch the game, it's just kind of unimpressive, And then you talk about you can't just be a scorer. He's just a scorer. He's inefficient at it, and he's not. He's been better this season defensively, but he's not at a level that his defense justifies playing him for how inefficient he is. He shoots the second most shots per game on the entire roster. He has, I think, the second highest usage by like 0.1% behind Şengün on the entire team. I think. I don't know what Cam Whitmore's is, but Jalen plays 30-something minutes a night, so obviously that's a bigger share of the offense. We talk about efficiency, and it sounds real nerdy, right? But what is efficiency? You got to win possessions, however that comes. If you're winning more possessions on defense, enough to make up for shitty offense, or vice versa, or if you're the two-way player and you're accounting for you're winning possessions on the offensive end, you're winning possessions on the defensive end. That's why if you can score and assist, you're accounting for like 40 to 50 points per game, and then you're playing good defense and you're helping your team win. He does none of those things, right? 52% TS, 30% from the free throw line. At this point, like they play better when he's not on the floor, and that just is what it is. He's undersized as well, right? Like he's listed at 6'4", 180 or something, but his presence on an NBA court with how like light his frame is and how kind of shifty he is to avoid contact, he presents as like 6'3", 175, like a quick guard. And that's cool. But man, if you're one of those guys, you better be able to shoot. And he can't. So at this point, I see people on Twitter sometimes they'll be like, oh, Jalen Green's really shown growth with his playmaking because he's like makes like a like a simple kick to the corner. And it's like, man, can we just not make shit up to just like try to manufacture this positivity? He hasn't shown it. There have been games where he's been like, oh my God, he looks like a star. But that's happened like 5 to, let's say, 12 times throughout the season. Like, is that what we're waiting on? So that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I know the people. I saw that tweet as well. It's like the Make a Wish tweets for him. To me, like I want everybody and people know I've been a Jalen Green. Like I'm not I still support him, but I think we also have to be honest. Like this is a business, is a sport. We talk about entertainment as far as the NBA for y'all. So we'd be doing y'all a disservice if we lied. You guys watched OKC. Look at Jalen Williams. That's a young player. There's an objective difference in watching a young player that is up. They're coming. Like he's going to be a guy. Yeah. And watching what we have. I think a lot of times Rockets fans gaslight each other into this delusion about, oh, he just needs that. Like, no, you can see, you didn't have to tell me Anthony Edwards needed 5 more years. Like from day one, even as inefficient as he was, I was like, that guy can play. Like this dude he's something. John Morant, like all SGA, even when he was a backup on the Clippers in the playoffs, trying to lock down. SGA was guarding Steph as a rookie in the playoffs before he could score. So we don't have to gaslight each other, guys. Like we know Jalen is not good right now. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. He's just not a good basketball player at this moment. Can he get better? We hope so. But he's not a good basketball player. And I think that where we are right now is like when you're building out this team, And this exercise really does point to that. And this kind of ties into that. Jackson had made that tweet about what the front office thinks about their, like, we have to really make sure that we're making these evaluations not on like because we drafted a guy a certain position, agency is this, or I like this type of player. Let's focus on the basketball. If we look at basketball, honestly, Jalen should probably not be getting the reps he's getting. But one positive thing, and I do agree with Robert at the end of that space, because we're at a very it's not depressing because I think we have a lot of young talent, but it is not a great time. Like we started this show telling you, we're basically in the same spot as we were when we just traded Victor Oladipo. We do have these players. I think the front office's job this summer is, as we look at this roster with these players, they need to figure out a direction. Where are we going as an organization? Because this stuff where we're giving Jalen the second most shots, he's like the worst player on the team. This guy doesn't play much. The roster doesn't have shooting, but you have a bunch of your best players can't shoot. Like it's just so much like things that contradict each other. Where are we going? And I think that's really what they have to answer for me, like going forward. But at least they have the talent to do it with the players.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not a terrible spot to be in. It's not good though, not great at least. It all
Right.
depends at the end of the day, man. And to your point, I agree. We should stop gaslighting each other. I stopped long ago, and it really rubs people the wrong way. People will tell me like, I hate that you're a fan. You're not even a fan, and I'm like, I guess, man, I don't know. At some point, like I just stopped drinking the Kool-Aid, and I was like, all right. I think it's just when you get older, you're just like, all right, man, I've seen this before. Like you said, we were
Right.
here 3 years ago. I know what this looks like. I'm not gonna fake myself into getting excited over this shit because I know, that something doesn't smell right. And it comes down to what you think about the players. Um, and the players some of them could hit, right? But if they don't, right, then what do you do? And so when I ask myself, I'm like, all right, well, they have Dylan Brooks on 4 years, 80 mil guaranteed. They got Fred on the deal. They got him on. Maybe you wait a couple more years and Fred comes off the books, but you still got Dylan. You got the Nets picks. One of them's due here in a couple months. So it's like something's got to happen soon if they want to turn this version of the team into like the contender. Otherwise, they're going to have to sell off some of these parts and wait for guys to come off the books and like kind of prolong this thing, right? So to your point, what is the vision? I don't really know. We've been watching all this and like, yeah, it's a combination of players and they play hard for the coach, but I don't really know where this is headed, and that's why it's been hard for me to be super positive and optimistic. If there was a vision, I could maybe buy into the vision and understand like, okay, that's where we're headed. But right now, everything's like, do they value Şengün? If they don't, okay, well, what's the vision? Who would they trade him for? What kind of person would they want to trade him for? What are they going to do with those Nets picks? They're just going to draft another player? Are they going to trade it? They're going to trade it for a guy like Mikal Bridges? Like, where are we headed? We have no idea. And that's not the greatest place to be, right? It feels like, I think we talked about it last night, but it feels like those Lakers with Lonzo and Julius Randle and Josh Hart and Kuzma, Brandon Ingram. Like, if that team stuck together, do you think that they're a contender? I don't, right?
No.
Like they had good players, but they didn't have like a team of, oh, holy shit, this all makes sense and perfectly contends. And I kind of feel like that's where the Rockets are. They got some pieces, some might not fit. You might not be able to play them all. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them are just role players, like Josh Hart. He was just a role player. Lonzo, good role player, but he was just a role player. Maybe that's Jabari. Maybe that's Tari. You know what I mean? So I don't know, but I guess we'll find out maybe soon. I'm not sure.
Tune in next time in the next episode of Dragon Balls. Now I'm playing, but appreciate you, bro. Appreciate y'all, man. Appreciate y'all for watching. If you are new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. Send us those comments. I want you guys to let us know what is your core six. Rank them based on how you will build out the team. Keep those comments coming, good, bad, and indifferent. We don't give a damn. We will keep making these episodes for y'all, but we do appreciate all the people that have been showing support and those who still watch the videos and don't like us. So y'all keep rocking with the Chop Shop. We're gonna keep dropping that.